Good morning, it's Pete. Pete Najarian here with Market Rebellion, and we are really excited about today's take because of the fact that there is so much packed into what we were seeing yesterday with the earnings. And the earnings were certainly something that stood out because when you look and you see the strength of the earnings and what's going on with the markets and the influence we are seeing, and let's just go back to yesterday. Yesterday, pre-market, markets looked like they were actually going to be somewhere pretty strong. We were looking at some triple digits moving to the upside. That really didn't pan out, at least very early on. And matter of fact, we started to sell off. And as we sold off, we kind of hit an area where we hit that pause in the first hour or so. But then towards the end of the day, you get the last couple hours of the day, and we started to see this explosive move to the upside. Matter of fact, Dow moved up about 300 points off of those lows to close up a little over 200 points. And the NASDAQ, sort of the same thing. It was up about 130 points to actually get into the green. So some nice movement there. That's why volatility is where it is. It's been holding up and still staying somewhere between that 17 and 18 level for the most part. And we've been underneath. We've gotten into the 16s. We've been up above, but it's been brief. It's been very, very brief on some of those moves. So yesterday, some of the stuff that was so weak that was pulling on the markets, especially as we were plummeting down early on, it was a lot of those stocks that we talk about, the high multiple, maybe even no multiple names. They were absolutely pulling on the NASDAQ yesterday. Peloton, DocuSign, Okta, all those kind of names. You know the routine. You know a lot of those names. Merck yesterday, we talk about earnings all the time. That got hit pretty strong. But what really stood out yesterday were two names, and that was Facebook, which was screaming to the upside. It had already been on a nice pace to the upside. You wondered, is a lot of it priced in? Well, apparently it wasn't, because it was a very, very explosive move to the upside yesterday for Facebook. And we still had so much option paper in there. It was absolutely extraordinary. As a matter of fact, touching on option paper, how about 38 million contracts yesterday? We had a monstrous day in terms of the volumes. Apple traded 2.3 million contracts. Tesla, 1.3 million contracts yesterday. Facebook, 1 million contracts yesterday. You had Ford pushing close to 1 million contracts as well yesterday. So a lot of activity, and we started to feel a little bit more. And some of that movement, I think, in the market certainly got a lot of people woken up a little bit, and they wanted to be involved because of the movement they were seeing and maybe some of those opportunities. eBay was another one of these names that certainly had been hit and hit pretty hard. And you look at all the earnings, and we have been going through this each and every day. And this has been a monstrous week across the board. We've talked about industrials. We've talked about a lot of different areas. Technology, of course, the focus on the big tech names, certainly stealing the show. But there's just so much movement going on. eBay with a big 10% move to the downside. That got slammed pretty hard. So we go off of that big rally in the second half of the day that got things actually moving to the upside and finishing into the green. So what do we have today? Had a lot of pressure on the market. In the pre-market, we're looking down about 185 points or thereabouts, 115 points on the NASDAQ. A little bit of improvement as we got closer to the open, as we got to the open, as we get to the first hour of trade, some definite improvement in the NASDAQ. And we're going to touch on some of the whys of that in just a second. But the Dow itself continues to be under some serious pressure, and that's down 185 in the pre, down about 150, holding on to that down 150. And the last I looked, we were down another about, call it 170 points. So a pretty strong push to the downside right now, presently at least, for the Dow itself. We have volatility coming back up into the 18s. We'll see if that's sustainable for anything more than a couple of hours, or will that be something as we price in the weekend? Because, of course, Fridays, you start to price in Saturday, no trading, Sunday, no trading, and then you get to Monday. So we'll see how the volatility changes and trades towards the latter part of the day. We'll see how much of an influence that's going to be as you look forward just a little bit. So the only sector that was in the green early on, consumer discretion. Outside of that, technology, energy, financials, industrials, they were all down about 0.5% or more. And that was really what some of the driving force was of some of these negative parts of the market that we were seeing, both in the Dow and the NASDAQ. But as I said, NASDAQ coming back. Take a look at this, just for a one-day chart, if you get the opportunity. Tesla. Now, I just had gotten off the phone before we came on with a friend of mine. We were talking about Tesla, and he was saying, you know, Tesla is such an interesting storyline because the markets really look at Tesla for sort of a read on the markets themselves, specifically in the NASDAQ. If you look at the NASDAQ and Tesla today individually, it almost looks identical, and a nice sharp move to the upside after being down, a nice big move to the upside from Tesla. It's early. We're only a little over an hour into the trading session. We'll see how that holds up, but there's a lot of different storylines, certainly as we've gotten through the earnings season. Supply shortages, that's one of them. Input costs, that's certainly one of them. We hear it all the time. Listen to that Clorox call. Listen to a lot of these various calls, Caterpillar and the rest. And just a really, a lot of different factors that are going into some of the results as we're getting what people are looking at last quarter with the earnings. And then how are they trading those? And certainly Twitter stands out for me today, because this is one of those names that had been screaming to the upside. I think it was up over 60% just in the last 6 months and down pretty significantly today. Last I looked, it was down about 13%. Amazon coming out with some incredible numbers. And we look at the earnings season, the numbers and the beats are at a record pace right now. And you look at Amazon, they beat a lot of those big names, the big cap names beating, but Amazon actually working a little bit better, almost looking a little more like a Google or a Facebook in terms of some of the reaction relative to some of the others where we'd seen some of that pressure to the downside with Microsoft and maybe even throw in Apple and some of those kinds of names. So we got two unusuals, and then I got to get out of here. I got the halftime report coming up at noon Eastern. So Weyerhaeuser, WY, that's going to be our first one. Stock's trading about 37.80, so just underneath 38. Got a buyer of 7,000 of the June 40 calls. So pretty significant. Those are going for about 75, 76 cents, something like that. It looks to be rolled from May. So they're coming out of the May 39 calls. Those are being sold, rolling up to these June 40 calls. So somebody who's been right and looking to see if they can continue to be right, looking to the upside, buying a little bit of time, getting out of May, getting into June, going up a little bit. So that's a pretty nice size trade. Like seeing something like that. Secondly, this one's really interesting. NLY. Now, you might not know this very well. NLY, a mortgage company, trading just above $9 a share. And here's what's really interesting. So they're buying the very last week of May, the May 28th expiring calls. They're the 9 calls, and those are trading now. The last I saw, about 3,000 of those were bought. Those were trading between 16 cents and 25 cents. So in other words, not a whole lot of premium in this, because these are the stock was trading 9.13 at the time of this trade. So not a whole lot of premium there, and gives you an opportunity if there's any reason for the stock to push to the upside. You can have a nice little run to the upside with very little money, capital thrown into this one, and you're not having to pay a whole lot of premium either. So kind of an interesting trade. Don't see that one that often. This is a really interesting company that actually is trading near its 52-week highs, well off of some of its highs, but there's a lot of different reasons there and a lot of different reasons why people are involved in this one. You take a look at the dividend yield, all the rest of that, all the fundamentals. But those options are definitely interesting. Caught my eye right away as soon as those hit. Folks, have a great day of trading. Knowledge is king. You're going to want the knowledge, and our guys here at Market Rebellion are the best educators in the business. Take a look. Take a look at the site. You're going to enjoy what you see, and you might even sign up and want to see a little bit more and understand a little bit more about the derivatives markets. I'll see you at noon today. Take care.